TPCSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all your sports books and track all your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You could also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as it's the best account on the platform. Head to App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire and download the app.
2,000 years long, we will never settle. Hard days, no way, with a heavy metal. No time, no fail, won't stop here. Like a torch to a flame when it burns hot. We won't stop. Come on, take me higher. Like a torch to a flame when it burns hot. We won't stop.
Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and it's that time of the week. I'm smiling ear to ear. It's the Midday Market Report with Ron Marmolevsky at Ron A Sports. It's a time when two AOL accounts combine, clash, and we talk NCAA and NFL. I'm smiling ear to ear. I got to give a shout out to our proud sponsors and partnerships. Of course, it's WagerWire. Head on over to Google Play, download the app. It's free. I promise you it will be the most used app, I'm going to say, by October 1st. Trust me on that one. And, of course, Viva Tequila Seltzer. Shout out to CT Bets. Go where you go to get your adult beverages. If they don't have Viva, ask why, because the East Coast is cuckoo for coconut. Their new brand here back east. I hope you're enjoying one just as we speak. And Terry Smith, Atlanta Steak and Seafood. I'm going to stop right now. If you're not following him, go over to right here on Twitter, X, Atlanta STK and Seafood. Follow him immediately. Then head over to Facebook, follow Terry Smith, and follow Atlanta Steak and Seafood. I got a care package today, second to none. We got a mini nor'easter going on here on Cape Cod. Wind, rain, all that garbage. My grill was on fire not too long ago. New York strip, prime, cowgirl. I had some real beef hamburgers. We had a little filet mignon as well. My daughters and wife are eating like champs, and my mouth is salivating because I can smell it. But anyways, I kept Ron long enough. So without further ado, the true star of this show, Mr. Ron Marmolevsky.
Well, now I feel like having a steak. What am I going to do? You got me all primed and ready for dinner. Doing great.
Good. Yeah, you got a couple hours, so you might even be able to sneak in a quick game or two of tennis in between. How's that, Ron?
That would sound good. I'm a little out of shape. Haven't been able to play for a couple of weeks. Looking forward to getting back into it next week.
Well, as long as you don't retire and go to the pickleball circuit, how's that?
No, I cannot cross that line. I'm sorry.
I mean, Yvonne Lendl, Jimmy Connors, McEnroe, they'd hate us if we did that.
No, I'm not doing that. Jack Sock, he's doing it. I'm not doing it. I just can't do it. It's literally about 400 it's about a 3-minute walk to get to the pickleball courts, and I can't do it.
I say no, and they are right down the road from me as well. I drive by early in the morning to go get my cardio, go to the gym, and I'm telling you, the courts are full, and I will not cross that line. I will not cross that line. College football. Be interesting to ask you: did Texas surpass Georgia in your numbers?
No, and I kind of prepped for this, trying to get my power numbers together. And believe it or not, Georgia is still slightly ahead of Ohio State and Texas. Texas is, I mean, those three are practically exact, but Texas did not pass. It's just those three are right there. Alabama has moved up to fourth. Oregon is still fifth. Mississippi, sixth. Penn State, seven. Those are my top seven.
And the funny thing is we've seen what Georgia can do. We've seen obviously what Texas can do, and not only what Texas can do. We've always been, they're a quarterback away. Let's say Ewers gets hurt, and of course insert Manning, and he goes from 10,000 to 1 to plus 1,600 on the Heisman. I'll ask you this: are we too late, or would you still take a little plus 1,600 on Manning
for the Heisman this year?
Yeah.
I really don't see it. I think Ewers is expected back, and then he'll be playing. That would be a really unbelievable story. These playoff games, if I remember correctly, they're played after the Heisman is announced. So it's got to be regular season only. As we have more playoff games, maybe they should delay the Heisman, because you could see teams and quarterbacks and running backs, wide receivers excel during the postseason. But if I remember correctly, it comes out before the bowl season.
All right, so we've been hyping up this Oregon Duck team for weeks, and they were just lackluster the first 2 weeks. The Ducks were quacking last week. Is that the real Ducks team that we were supposed to expect? And the first 2 weeks they were just sleepwalking? Or are we going to get the real Duck team in a couple of weeks when Ohio State comes in to Eugene and faces Oregon?
That's going to be a really good battle, because, yes, Oregon was sleepwalking a little bit. That offense, they just need to get all the parts together. It's tough when I know there's 60 transfer quarterbacks in college. And one of them came to Oregon, of course, who replaced another transfer quarterback, Bo Nix. And he just needed to get acclimated into the system. Dylan Gabriel, new wide receivers for him, new go-to wide receiver, because Franklin is in the NFL also with Bo Nix in Denver. So there's an adjustment period, but that offense, when it peaks like it did last week, it's run pass balance. And that's going to be quite a tussle against a very good defensive coordinator with Ohio State, Jim Knowles. So the bigger question I have is Chip Kelly and the Ohio State offense versus what we're going to see on the Oregon defense. I think that's where the battle is going to be won or lost. Oregon deserves to be in the top 5 to 7 conversation. That game's going to go a long way to determining whether or not they're the number 1 team in the Big Ten, but it may be the first of 2 matches between Oregon and Ohio State if it all plays out.
If that game was tipping off this Saturday, would you still have Oregon a slight favorite, or is it more of a pick 'em?
My numbers would favor Ohio State by a half a point, so it's pretty much pick 'em.
All right. Well, was it the perfect storm? We talked about Georgia. We last week talked a Kentucky team that got embarrassed by a South Carolina team that fought a hell of a game against LSU on Saturday there that we talked about. For us here at ECSI, we had the Kentucky team total over 10.5. I did not have 4 field goals on my bingo card when I released that. A Kentucky defensive played phenomenal, moved the ball okay, kind of a couple questionable coaching decisions late there not to go for it. Thoughts on Georgia and thoughts on Kentucky last Saturday night?
It's a long season, and you have a little leeway, of course, with the new 12-team playoff if you're Georgia, and you're going to have games like this. The SEC, when they added 2 dynamite teams, when the Big Ten added a couple of very interesting teams in USC and Oregon, you're just going to play tougher opponents. week in and week out in the conference schedule. So this was Kentucky's season, kind of. You're playing against the big boys. You want to measure up to that. You're going to give your heart and soul into this game. And that's what they did. And Kentucky's ahead of the curve defensively. They've been showing a really good defense all the way through, but they keep changing coordinators in terms of the offense, and there's been a little bit of a lack of continuity there. They haven't gotten as much out of their quarterback play. And yes, Georgia's a really good defense. When you get in the red zone, Georgia's going to stop you. That's just the way it goes. So great effort by Kentucky. They couldn't get over the hump. Georgia's going to have to play better offensively, better run pass balance, I think. Again, I did knock Georgia down, but I only knocked them down a point in the power ratings. I toyed with going 1.5 and stuff like that. That would make them more even with Ohio State and Texas. But at this point, a win is a win, and they won the game.
It's funny because social media, a lot of the rankings flip-flop, Texas and Georgia. And the real experts that I talk to are like, not so fast. What are you guys forgetting about Ohio State here?
Yeah.
So I don't think we've seen enough Ohio State publicly yet this year. Am I correct?
Yeah, Ohio State has looked better in the second half of games than the first half of games. They were allowing teams to stay with them, and then they scored a lot of points against bad teams in the fourth quarter. But that's when you have a really good team against a perceived team that's not at all to Ohio State's caliber, you're going to have that wear down factor. It happened under John McKay in USC for years and years and years. Student body left, student body right. And Ohio State's not immune to wanting to go that route. I know they have two really good receivers, including a freshman receiver, but we can't forget that they have a really good running game too. And their defense, a lot of those guys came back. They turned down the NFL and they came back. And eventually the offenses that they're going to face, they're going to try different things and it's not going to work. And then they're going to panic and they're going to throw into coverage. I'm not worried about Ohio State per se. I think in general, they played as well or better than Georgia. And yes, Texas may have outplayed them both, but we're going to find out a lot more about these teams when the competition ramps up.
We talked last Thursday about Alabama first road game to Wisconsin, and I know there was a lot of sharp people on Wisconsin thinking that the number was off a little, and it looked like they were correct, especially early. Wisconsin jumps out to a 3-0 lead. Alabama's offense just struggling. We saw them play, excuse my French here, grab ass with South Florida for 3.5 quarters till they erupted for 42. Well, it didn't take them 3.5 quarters. Next thing you know, I leave the room, I get a sandwich, I get a nice beverage, and I sit down and I'm like, whoa, what did I miss? An absolute explosion by the Crimson Tide. Handling Wisconsin pretty easily, setting up for a pretty big game, I think, next week in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, that's going to be a big game. And that game, the odds have flipped as well. I would favor Georgia by 0.5 point over Alabama, just like Ohio State by 0.5 point over Oregon. So you got two fantastic games shaping up down the road. I was on Wisconsin. I had a very good week if you look at the one-loss record, but Wisconsin was actually my biggest play. And when Van Dyke went 5 for 5 in the opening sequence and then got hurt, I think settling for a field goal, that may have deflated Wisconsin a little, and then they couldn't really get the offense going. And then maybe there was a deflation the rest of the game. We'll never really know if Wisconsin could have hung with Alabama. Sounds like Alabama was going to win, but I don't know if Van Dyke, with that sharp start with his confidence, whether or not Wisconsin, I want to say that Wisconsin might have been able to hang with the number. But still, with all that said, Alabama is one of my 4 biggest risers on my power ratings from the beginning of the season. Part of that is maybe I downgraded them a little, but they're one of the 4 that I have along with Texas. So that's, 2 really good teams that have risen high in my power ratings since the start of the season. So I'm not going to discount the fact that Alabama deserves to be in the national title contention.
Well, two more games I want to bring up, or teams I should say I want to bring up. Are we officially playing taps for Florida State? Had a few experts on last week that really liked the Memphis side. They thought the number was totally off there. Memphis comes in, not only covers but wins the game outright. We had their team total under 23.5. Thank God they stuck on 20 there. A year ago in January, they're waiting to see if they're in the Final Four, and then they play Georgia. Then they play this year Georgia Tech, BC, and now Memphis. Kind of obviously a must-win against Cal this week.
Yeah, it just shows you that one team one year is not the same in another year. In college, you used to know your freshmen become sophomores, your sophomores become juniors, and so on. Not anymore with the transfer portal and the nil money and so on. So Florida State's a completely different team with a completely different quarterback. Defense is a little softer. The run game is nothing. If you remember last year, Florida State brought back an offensive line that combined for 209 college football starts. That was obviously going to be an area that they would have to regroup and revamp for this year. And it hasn't come together. They're not running the ball at all. And then you look at the opponents that you mentioned that Florida State has played, and we don't see a Padunk State or Padunk Tech or anything like that. Some of these SEC directional schools that the SEC guys get to play. Florida State's played some pretty decent competition, and Cal has a veteran coach, a veteran defense as well. So they're not getting the easy game that can refurbish their confidence. So, it's a toss-up game again. I'm staying completely away from it, but I'll be interested not only from a Florida State standpoint, but Cal's first game in a conference they should never be in. But regardless of that, how does Cal take the East Coast trip, and do they have that confidence going in? Hey, wait a second. This isn't the Florida State that was a top 10 team over the last few years. We know we can beat this team. Let's go in there and beat them. It's going to be an interesting game to look back on and to see what develops. I'm very curious how each team reacts in this game.
Two games I can't wrap my head around. Both teams. Russell wanted to know, how does Ron keep up with the Kardashians with the football data he tracks?
I don't know. That maybe that's why there's only football for me and nothing else.
I have had a hard time, and I think the books have had a hard time gauging this BC team. Again, go to Tallahassee, they win, and then of course they destroy Duquesne. I didn't understand the 15-point spread against Missouri. I thought Missouri played grab ass the first half, had opportunities maybe, but was never threatened to really potentially cover that game. Now BC 7-point favorites Saturday night at the Heights for the red bandana game against Michigan State. And the other game, Ron, is, I bleed red, a sea of red. Nebraska's back. I get it. It's not the 80s with Tom Osborne, Tommy Frazier, and the Wishbone. Yet they're 10-point favorites against Illinois this week as well.
Yeah. So as far as BC is concerned, I mentioned Alabama and Texas as my top rising power ratings. Arizona State and Boston College are the other two in that conversation. Those are my four highest power rating changes from where I started. Interesting enough, just to divert, and not a surprise, I'm sure, to you and anybody watching, is Florida State is my biggest faller. They've fallen 9 points, and I can't adjust it fast enough. I should probably, based on the numbers, be 11 points different instead of 9. That's why it's fascinating. They're my biggest faller. Air Force, very disappointing to me, but luckily caught on real quick after that very first game against Merrimack. They're the second biggest faller, and Wyoming, no surprise to anybody else, is my third biggest faller. As far as this game, Boston College and Michigan State, maybe I haven't adjusted Boston College enough, because there's slight value on Michigan State on the line for me. I don't know if they've warranted being as much as a 7, I guess pretty much 6.5 point favorite right now. It's going to be one of those close to the vest games, both teams feeling each other out, maybe trying to establish that ground game. I don't have a major opinion on this game, but I think you're looking at two programs, two coaches who have been around the block a little bit and had success at various places that are probably 1 year away from total success. But both of these teams and both of these coaches are probably on the right path for success moving forward.
And your thoughts? Are we inflating the sea or redwood? I thought Matt Rule's greatest success is year 3, and of course now Nebraska undefeated. Some think can start the year 6-0 or maybe even 7-0 the way the path is going. Listen, I'm not an Illini fan, but again, to see Nebraska, double digit in some spots, 10-point favorites, I could see maybe 7.5. I love the quarterback. I love their defense. I know Illini have a hard time scoring. Is this going to be more predicated on the defense here? And that's why it is as high as 10?
Yeah, it's the line is a little inflated, but this is what we talked about last week and even at the beginning of the season. Nebraska's minus 17 turnover ratio at 3.75 per turnover. That's 65, almost 70 points they could save by just having a 0 turnover ratio. So if they get in the plus market because of that defense, very good run defense, very good point defense, and so on. If they get in the plus market, which they are, I believe, right now, you're talking about over 70 points saved. And remember all those close games they lost, the last 4 games of the season by 10 points. So it's not a shock that if they don't turn the ball over, and they've got a young freshman quarterback who's excelling right now, if they don't turn the ball over, this is a legit 9-win team, and Nebraska is back. And the fan base, which has been extremely patient, the greatest fan base in the world, really. They're so polite and everything, that goes with college football, which is hard to be polite in this day and age in social media. Thrilled for them. The Illini, they're going to have to try to run the ball on Nebraska. I like their quarterback, Altmaier. He has a chance. I think he threw, I looked it up, almost 300 yards on Nebraska last week. So he can have some success. They can get within the number. I don't think Illinois is always fundamentally sound at end of games. They play more of a college-style clock management system, which is usually not good. You'd rather have a pro style. Although when we talk about the NFL, I don't have enough fingers on one hand to tell you how many coaches don't understand clock management anymore. It used to be the college guys could learn from the pros. Maybe not. But this is a good game. I think Nebraska finds a way to win. If they keep that turnover margin flat again, this is a team that is going to reach its potential, and we've all been waiting for that.
Before we transition to the NFL, if anyone watching Standing Room Only right now, head on over to X to Ron Ace Sports. Please follow Ron, and then when we conclude here, he'll tell you where you can find all his written work and all that good stuff as well. Ron, anything in pocket, any edges that you can kind of leak out to the people watching and listening that you see in the college ranks this weekend?
I guess we'll go to the marquee game, something I don't always do. And this is going to be one of my biggest tug of wars. I mean, I can't tell you how much internal strife I have right now for this weekend, because at the beginning of the year, I have some tickets, pretty big tickets on Michigan under 9.5 wins. And I'm also not that sold on Oklahoma. So you have Oklahoma playing Tennessee, and the line, I don't understand it. I have Tennessee, according to my numbers, as the smallest of favorites. And then you have USC playing Michigan, and I actually have Michigan as a slight favorite in that game. So I've got problems internally that I have to deal with, because power rating dogs over 35, 40 years are automatic plays for me. And when they're this big, I'm going to be sitting on Oklahoma and I'm going to be sitting on Michigan. And yeah, based on my preseason analysis, these guys could be blown out. But if you take the game single-handedly, the biggest worry I have for Oklahoma is keeping up with the pace of Tennessee's offense. I'm not too worried about some of the other things. I know Tennessee's showing a pretty good run defense. Oklahoma's quarterback is a run threat, even more than the running back. So they're going to have start and stops offensively. The biggest question I have is, can they keep up defensively with the fast pace of Tennessee? And my biggest question for Michigan and for USC is, I think Michigan's going to try to ram it down their throat. I don't think Michigan's current head coach is creative enough to do anything else. I think Michigan's defense is still well above the norm. I'm worried completely about Michigan's quarterback. I know they changed quarterbacks. They're trying something in that area. I like Michigan's lead running back even more than Edwards in this particular game. I think USC might still be vulnerable, even with the defensive coordinator change with the run down their throat kind of methodology. If not, I'm going to take a loss. If not, my power ratings are going to be vastly adjusted, and I'm going to be right about what I said preseason. Fascinating games. Like it or not, I'm going to be on the dog in both games.
I've had a few people on this week that see the same exact thing. So you're not alone, and you won't be alone come Sunday, Saturday.
Hopefully we're at the cashier's window all together. All the guys that I respect and myself.
Transition to the NFL any given Sunday, not for long, and that's what not for long stands for. If you were in the Circus Survivor contest, over 14,000 put down not just $1,000 per entry. Some had 5, some had 10. You got to pay a proxy service if you don't live in Las Vegas to put those picks in. Less than 4,000 stand. The carnage, especially after last week. And I tell you, they were one score away from the Bears from losing another 2,300 that were on the Texans. Give us what your eyes saw on week 2.
Yeah. You bring out the Bear game. That was, I'm in a little thing with 30 people that we always do. And that was the survivor pick I picked was Houston. So I was one of those that I thought Houston could win by a little bit more than that. But, you take what you can get. And ours, actually, 14 out of 30 are still left, which is an extremely high percentage compared to any other survivor poll. So these guys are tough competition right now with considering all the upsets. And that's what we have so far this year. We have a lot of teams that are still finding their way. Who are the good teams? Who are not the good teams? We don't know which team should be favored, which team shouldn't be favored. My eyes last week pretty much told me that we have some 2-0 teams that had good coaching that got through, like Houston. D'Amico Ryans is a superstar head coach. Mike Tomlin finds a way to win. His Pittsburgh team has scored, one offensive touchdown or something like that. And then you have the teams that had bad schemes like Denver, bad clock management like Philadelphia. These are teams that could have been Philadelphia could have been 2-0, failed. Tennessee has stubbed their own toe, could have been 2-0, they're 0-2. And Kansas City, they just know how to win. Certainly they could have lost the Baltimore game. And on 4th and 16, Cincinnati could have won that particular game. So what we know is that the NFL is in flux, and I'm telling you right now, there are no superstar teams. The power ratings are bunched.
I look at this week's schedule, and I think you nailed it. Unfortunately, in my local survivor, I had the Ravens, who were up 10 in the middle of the fourth quarter. And again, no sense of urgency. Usually when Lamar has a lead, it's safe. But when he's coming from behind, forget about it. And again, I and most of our pool is dead, but the people that had the Chargers, the people that had the Texans were definitely moving on, of course, there. Tonight, my locals, the New England Patriots, 6.5 point underdogs, short week, divisional game. Jets get their first home game. They opened up at San Francisco with not too much success there. And then they went to Tennessee, hard-fought game there, found a way to win there. Thought process on tonight's game. Patriots catching about 6.5 with about a 37.5. My numbers have it 21-17 Jets, but I'm kind of curious what you see in tonight's game.
Yeah, my numbers are on to the line. It's no difference here. What I think is going to happen, Jet fans be patient, is that they get this mini bye after this. So they're going to have the 10 days to regroup. And remember, the NFL did them no favors. Monday night, Sunday, Thursday. That's their first three games after walking through the preseason like most teams do. You're going to see a sloppy, terrible game tonight. That's my opinion. If they're all efficient, erase this part of the segment. But I think most likely you're going to see teams not really in rhythm. The Jets haven't really developed their sense of controlling the defensive line like we're used to seeing. And based on that, New England's going to try to run with Stevenson. If you got these short weeks, you don't have a lot of time to prepare. The simplest game plan is just to run right at them and see whether or not that works. And maybe that works. New England shortens another game. They're close to 2-0. They played tough. I think you'll see the real New England kind of regress later in the year. But in this particular game, I think anything can happen because I think the Jets, both teams are going to be fatigued, in my opinion. So I think the Jets are going to have to step it up just one notch defensively to make this work. But I will say this is a coming up possible party for Aaron Rodgers to improve his accuracy. He gets a New England defense that's not usually good at sacking the quarterback ever since Judon went down with injury and then was traded. So we haven't seen them finish as far as the sacks. So if Aaron Rodgers has more time, and we know how accurate he has been over his career, I think you're going to see a high pass percentage today. And maybe that carries the Jets to victory.
Russ says Pats like to bounce and run outside and test the corners. Sauce over 2.5 tackles and assists is juiced, but a very strong play.
All right, interesting. I haven't got into the tackles and assists part. I'm just running with what I need to get to right now. The props, I don't want to tell you what the prop record is because it's unbelievable right now, but they've all been small because I'm feeling my way. I have new methodology there. It's a tremendous record, but they've all been small.
Dallas. I have to say when I'm right, I say when I'm wrong. I was not buying the Saints. I was not. I thought, of course, the perfect storm against the Panthers. 6.5-point underdogs at Dallas. Dallas looked phenomenal at Cleveland. The Saints, 15 for 15. If you had that Derek Carr possessions and scores on your bingo card, God bless you there. Dallas just a clunker, and the Saints, they are who they thought we were. I don't know how to even pronunciate it right now because they just got me blown away right now, the Saints.
Yeah, so the Saints, we're seeing a real tick up because of finally an offensive coordinator change. Dennis Allen is a defensive mind. He's pretty conservative. He's on my bottom list in terms of coaches. He goes out, finally replaces Pete Carmichael, gets a new offensive coordinator, and what an instant bounce for this team that's actually still missing a part or two in terms of their wide receiver group and in their offensive line. You are a function of who you played, and New Orleans competition will ramp up this week against Philadelphia. Philadelphia will have a short week, and they have to forget about how the last game played out because there's no way they would have been an underdog if you complete that pass or if you run the ball instead of throwing that pass at the end of the game. And that enabled Atlanta to come back and win. I think the Saints are full of confidence. It wouldn't shock me if they won this game, but I have this number slightly inflated right now. And the competition, 2 weeks isn't a big sample size if one of your games has been against Carolina and Bryce Young and the new coaching staff there. So I have more I need to see out of the Saints before I anoint them as a really top-of-the-line team.
AFC Championship team last year hosting the Ravens. We know the outcome there. Kansas City comes in and not only wins the Super Bowl. 0-2 again. A tough loss on that first Thursday in Kansas City. Come back home to the Raiders. pretty comfortable favorites. Some late money did come in on the Raiders. The west to east, the whole blah, 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 blah. Ravens 10-point lead late. And hats off again to the Ravens, the Raiders, Matt and Mr. Crosby, and found a way to win. And now the Ravens got to go to Dallas, who got embarrassed at home. Two things are going to happen. Either the Ravens leave Dallas in Jerry's world 1-2 like Dallas, or Dallas bounces back and is 2-1. Excuse me. And the Ravens are 0-3. What? If you had Biff's Almanac, what's going to happen on Sunday?
Yeah, Biff's Almanac is pretty good to have. Unfortunately, Baltimore is used to blowing fourth quarter leads. Sometimes they come back and win, but they don't cover. There's something about Harbaugh that I've been on to for 5, 6, 7 years. This looks like a shootout on paper, and you're right. We're either going to hear, Lamar can't win against this team. We're going to hear the Lamar story again. We're going to start to hear some rumblings maybe about Harbaugh if they lose. And the only person we're going to hear from Dallas is the same person we hear from day after day, week after week, year after year. We have to listen to Jerry Jones again, one way or another. And I'm kind of tired of hearing Jerry Jones. Most owners own teams. They don't, unless you're Al Davis, who, eat and slept and lived for football and was a coach and stuff like that. I really don't want my owner to be the mouthpiece week in and week out of a team. But that's what we're going to have. I have a lean to Baltimore as bouncing back in this game. I think they're the more complete team. The question is, can they finish? And that's the question about Baltimore for a long time. Can they finish? And something's going on with their kicker, Tucker. All of a sudden, he's missing some of these automatic kicks. And, this could come down to a field goal. This has the makings of the lead's going to change hands in the fourth quarter. So while I lean to Baltimore, I just think it's going to be interesting to see what happens if Baltimore falls to 0-3. Baltimore and Cincinnati are still the favorites to win in the NFC North, ahead of 2-0 Pittsburgh and 1-1 Cleveland. But you can't keep losing games before you get into divisional matchups, because that's just going to be, those are going to be so important when that division beats up against each other. And if you're already losing before you get to divisional games, last year, didn't we have all 4 teams in the AFC North get in? It could be only one this coming year.
You talked about Tucker. I think I saw the tweet, 4 missed field goals of 50 or more this year in the NFL, and 2 of them are by Tucker. Tucker almost has the yips now for anything with 50 and longer. He used to be Mr. Automatic, and his counterpart this weekend, Mr. Aubrey, is Mr. Automatic. Yeah. I don't even know anything, under 55. Why even bother? That's what we used to do with Tucker. Go to a commercial. The guy's going to hit it dead center. Lastly, I'm having you here overtime. I apologize. Tell the wife I am sorry. We talk about the Chiefs, 2-0, Super Bowl champs, going for that three-peat like my UConn Huskies in men's basketball starting on November 1st here. We're not talking about they were a quarter inch from Lively scoring that touchdown, and Mr. Harbaugh already went for 2, so they were going to go for the win. And a PI, which was a clear PI, but there was a million other misplays, blah, blah, blah. They technically could be 0-2. Traveling to an Atlanta team who obviously feeling a little rejuvenated as they stole the game on Monday. Thoughts on Kansas City traveling to Atlanta?
Well, first, let's talk about Atlanta and why this line is as low as it is. And I kind of agree with where the line is. And the reason I do is because without that last drive by Atlanta, Kirk Cousins would not have been in rhythm. Kirk Cousins would not have known that he could flash back. He basically, what was it, down 6 at the end of the game with a minute something left, kind of the same situation as, Philadelphia let him into the situation, of course, with the drop pass. But either Cousins delivered in that. He just had to think, I got to be old Cousins. I just have to do this and this. He had no thoughts about the Achilles, about not leaving the pocket, about doing what he needed to do. That drive, you could hear it in their voices. And I said it to my wife even before anybody talked post game. That drive changed Atlanta's fortunes and made them, I think it just changed the whole locker room in terms of where they were. Now, holding New Orleans tickets in the division at plus 435 and plus 450, I wish Atlanta didn't have that drive. But Atlanta had that drive, and I think it's really makes this game competitive. Where Kansas City is, good teams and good coaches find ways to win when they're not at their best. Or when they're playing their best, Kansas City just barely beats a Buffalo team year after year in the playoffs. Just that little edge of coaching or Mahomes or whatever it is, or the Super Bowl. Kansas City's not a superstar team yet this season, but they're Kansas City, and they just feel like they're going to win these close games. The big edge for Kansas City in this game is even with Matthew Judon, Atlanta's pass rush still hasn't really hit home right now. So you're looking at Mahomes probably completing a very high percentage of passes. So we have to switch over. Kirk Cousins has all this confidence. Kirk Cousins could have a stellar game as well. For Atlanta to win this game, I think it's more about Kirk Cousins because I don't think Atlanta will really stop Mahomes. Look forward to the game. It could be a shootout, but if it's close again at the end, here you go with Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes.
And Andy Reid factor here, it's almost like this is what he loves. Pacheco goes out late in the game with an injury, out maybe 8 weeks, 4 to 8 weeks, they're saying, on the IR. They bring in Kareem Hunt, who knows the system, obviously, but I think personally, just a shell of himself. They got Mr. Carson Steele. They brought in Mr. P. Ryan late. Hold on 1 second here. I get something in front of me here. Any idea at the running back situation?
Yeah, I think Carson Steele probably has the most upside for this week because we don't know what we get from Kareem Hunt. And you can run on Atlanta. So Carson Steele, who showed the ability in college to break off some good yards per carry, some good gainers, I think that's good. What they're going to be missing is Pacheco he's an angry runner is what I call him. He runs with a lot of purpose. He breaks tackles. I mean, he just dares you to bring him down. I mean, the guy's from Rutgers, and Rutgers had no offensive line, and they didn't have Greg Schiano all the time while he was there. And he had to eke out every single yard he could with no pass attack whatsoever at Rutgers. And he just has continued to run angry in the NFL. And that's going to be missed. That component is going to be missed for Kansas City. How much they miss it this week, I'm not sure, but it will be a factor down the road. And that's why no team really stands out in the NFL, even Kansas City right now.
Before we go to your closing thoughts, is there any NFL? You gave us Michigan, Oklahoma in the college side. Anything in the NFL compared to your numbers that looks like an edge for the listeners?
And not really. I think the biggest thing to watch, and this is kind of part of the closing thoughts, is, again, what do you do with the quarterback changes? Last week we talked about the fact that Jordan Love was not playing, and the edge wasn't, to me, you didn't have to downgrade as much because of who they were playing. And so I thought Willis would be okay last week. This week, you got Andy Dalton coming in Carolina. That'll be interesting. And then you have a fascinating game, Seattle and Miami. And you have Skyler coming in for Tua. I'm curious to see what Miami brings to the table. I know they're banged up and so on. I don't know if it's an edge. The only edge is in a very difficult week as far as handicapping, I could tell, is people are going to vary their opinions on these injury quarterback games. And even in the San Francisco LA Ram game, what are you going to do? How are you going to handicap all those injuries? And I think some people are going to think that I have an edge because I'm handicapping these injuries differently than the odds makers. So in the Miami game, in the Ram game, in the Carolina game, I think how we figure out what's the difference between the starting wide receivers for the Rams and the backup wide receivers. What can Stafford do without them? What can we do without Tua? What can we do upgrading Andy Dalton, who's rusty but very experienced, over Bryce Young? Those are the games that are going to be the matches that I'm going to look at to see if I can find value.
Well, I hope I didn't steal your thunder because we do always end with that little 7 yard button hook. And as we like to close out this show, Ron's closing thoughts.
Well, we talked about power ratings a couple years ago, so a couple weeks ago. So I want to just update the power ratings where I have right now. It's after Kansas City, I have Buffalo a half point behind Kansas City. And those are the two right now. I don't have a third team. I probably would have San Francisco third if they were completely healthy, but we know they're not completely healthy. They still missed their linebacker. They missed somebody else on defense this week. They worked out 3 defensive backs in this past week, so we know they're deficient in that area. We knew that coming in. Deebo Samuel is going to be out. McCaffrey's going to be out. So it's really Kansas City and Buffalo. And at the bottom end is Carolina and the New York Giants for me. I don't think everybody has the New York Giants as low as I do, and they have a chance to move up in this game against Cleveland if they could show a pulse. But Carolina, just to let people know, I agree with the movement that Andy Dalton is worth about 1.5 or 2 points over Bryce Young. Bryce Young just has no confidence. I don't think Andy Dalton's ceiling is certainly not as high as it used to. He's more or less going to be efficient, try to stay turnover prone. He doesn't always do that. He's going to hit the reads quicker than Bryce Young. Bryce Young still might have a ceiling, but a non-confident quarterback is like a non-confident kicker. When your confidence goes and you want to see it, and the windows aren't that big to throw that pass in the NFL. So I agree that Andy Dalton is about 1.5 to 2 point upgrade. Still, Carolina is 32nd in my power ratings.
And I did see some money initially come in with the Red Rifle himself, Andy Dalton coming. I almost looks like a perfect storm for the Panthers. In comes Dalton, and the Raiders feeling a little high on themselves after beating the Ravens. Real tough for people to go to the window and back this Panthers team. So if you do, hold the nose, put it in, and just set it and forget it. Right, Ron?
That's what you have to do this week. There's going to be a few more ugly games until everybody gets their footing. And we're seeing every year we see injuries early in the season. This year, a lot of defensive injuries as compared to offensive injuries, a lot of wide receivers. Most of the quarterbacks are still intact. So hopefully that's good for the NFL.
Well, everyone knows here on X to go find you at Ron A Sports. But as we always close the this show and this segment, this is your platform, your stage here, Ron. Tell them where they can find all your work, your written work, and expectations throughout the week.
So on Tuesdays, Las Vegas, Chris and I, we brainstorm the NFL. We test each other as far as concepts, theories, what we're seeing in a team. We try to get ahead of the curve. If we notice something, if we learn something from each other, it's just a conversation that everybody can eavesdrop in because we recorded podcasts. And then Ted, Chris, and I, we do the Inside Blitz. We preview the Thursday game. We go over some interesting tidbits. What makes that show unique is that Ted finds sound bites. We had a couple of very interesting sound bites if you listen to that show, where the coach, Antonio Pierce of the Raiders, didn't even know that Andy Dalton was going to be starting. And it came up in question and answer and so he said, to the mic where Ted was, we have to go back to the drawing board. So the audio makes that show kind of unique. Haven't written much this year, but I'm hopeful that I'm going to start writing an article or two every once in a while. And where and when that's published, I will let people know. Otherwise, just follow me, watch this show weekly. Always a pleasure to be on with you. Appreciate it.
Well, we can't thank you enough. A great way to end Thursday for us and get us ready for kickoff at 8:20. This week it is the New England Patriots traveling to the Jets and their home opener, of course. So I can't thank everyone else for watching and listening. Mr. Saylor, thank you so much as always. Thank you to Wager Wire, Viva Tequila Seltzer, and of course, Mr. Terry Smith at Atlanta Steak and Seafood. Tomorrow morning, 11 a.m. Eastern, the NCAA Insiders will be back. Matt Grissom, Quentin Mills will talk some college football there. So, and if, let me see, 6:15, Scotty Webb will be back for Inside the Batter's Box. From myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one and only Ron Momorlewski at Ron A Sports. We wish everyone a blessed day. Enjoy the football game tonight, and we will see you soon.